Yes, guys, like I was saying, I stayed away for about 10 years because of the war on terror in the US. They're making it so difficult to travel with the Patriot Act and the Islamophobia and all that stuff during the Bush years and well into the Obama years. I hadn't traveled and hadn't left the US for 10 years, so I can understand the people who stayed away from Guyana for morning for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years since you've visited Guyana. And I understand how that can happen because, like I said, I ended up spending 10 years away. The years just keep adding up because you're waiting for the chaos and the hysteria around terrorism to settle down. I was studying at the time, didn't want to end up not being able to complete my education because of constant changes of foreign policy. You know, changing who could enter the country and who could leave the country and so on. So after a time I got tired of that, and that's how I left the US. And I know that a lot of people are still dealing with that because of the migrant crisis there. But this is a situation in Guyana. If you haven't been back in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, the train line road was built maybe 20 years ago or so to relieve traffic on the east coast, the Rupert Craig Highway. And now they're widening it because this narrow road is no longer adequate to handle the amount of traffic that comes down the east coast on a weekday morning. I would have preferred, of course, to build mass transit, that is return the train line to this section of the city, of the country, so that people have an alternative to the car. The problem with cars is the more roads you build, the wider roads you build, the more congestion you create because more people choose to drive. And if you provided the alternative of a train, you'll be able to move the same amount of people. They'll be able to get their jobs done, but without vehicles, without additional vehicles. Or at least a vehicle will become something to use on a recreation, for recreation instead of something to be used for daily commute as it's done in the States. You get a different city, a different atmosphere. You get a much more relaxed atmosphere. You don't have crazy people acting up on the roads because they're stressed and they have road rage. So one way to deal with traffic congestion and road rage and all that comes with the use of vehicles is to simply build mass transit, build light rail, build high-speed rail, build train systems. So far that is falling on deaf ears, but what is actually happening is they're making wider roads. This is like a 1960s approach, a 20th century approach to living in the 21st century. But we're all here for the ride. We're going along for the ride because that's the vision of the current government. Like I said in the previous video, it will take another government to come in and fix all this mess that they're creating. Because quite frankly, this is a mess. And the reason why is clearly, you can look at places that have used roads, that have built societies around roads, and you will see that those societies are not less congested. What you just get is a lot of traffic, a lot of urban sprawl, all right, the suburban sprawl, and very low density housing. Basically, you get places that are not feasible to build companies or businesses at because the density of people available to work in those areas in the suburbs is not high enough. All right, so if you were to set up your company in the suburbs, people would have to commute. The reason why cities exist is because people congregated in a location and then businesses were established in that location, which is what sustains the city, the urban centers. And while in America, suburbs were built specifically as a way to isolate white people from black people to create segregation. In Guyana, we really don't need to build suburbs for those reasons. There's really no need to segregate the population. Instead, they ought to be building connected neighborhoods, and for that reason, building a train line across this country along the East Coast would have been much preferable to building more and more wider roads. But you can probably do the same. What it means, however, is that instead of building on the ground, building train lines on the ground, you're going to have to build them up in the air. You have to build elevated lines, like the L train lines now, and that's more expensive. Robert Moses was actually told to build a rail line to extend the Queens line, straight lines, subway lines, into JFK Airport. At that time, it was called Idlewild Airport. And Robert Moses disagreed. It would take decades, I think 60 or 70 years later. Is the dog having a bad time here? It would take 60 or 70 years to build the air train. I remember just around the time when I was leaving New York, the air train was opening. And I used it a few times. I think it was $5 to ride the air train at that time. I think it's $8 now. That was 2011. But the air train provided a connection to JFK so that you could hop off a plane and get into the city without being stranded or at the airport or having to pay some exorbitant taxi fare, now Uber fare, with a congestion pricing. So that is the reason why you want to build train lines, because you want to remove the incentive to gouge people for transportation. Transportation should be, that is getting around the country, should be almost free, if not free. In some cases, they have made it free. So this is it, guys. This is Sheriff Street. That is that is the Sheriff Hospital here on Sheriff Street. Let's see what they call it, Sheriff Medical Center. Right, that's the Sheriff Medical Center here. Sheriff is actually building a lot of these things around the country. A lot of people still think that universities and hospitals and so on are just buildings where you offer a service and you collect a fee. Unfortunately, that's not how healthcare works or education works, and so it's one of the reasons why I'm building a university and building an associated healthcare center with it. This is Sheriff Street looking south, right? That eventually becomes Mandela Avenue once you go past the gardens. This is the Gayoil station here at the corner of Sheriff. And this is the roundabout, Sheriff and Train Line Road. And this is the roundabout. This is the roundabout at Sheriff Street. Sheriff Street looking north towards the seawall. That's looking back along the Train Line Road where we came from. And this is looking at the continuation. That's looking at the David Street in Kitty. And this is the continuation of the Train Line Road now going into the city. So we've basically been walking along the Train Line Road, and this Train Line Road goes all the way, I think, to the Lamaha Street embankment, where that embankment, that's where the train line used to be, has been turned into a park, right? Lamaha Embankment Park. And that embankment goes all the way to the end of the road where I showed you the Cowan Street end, the end of Cowan Street, where there's some old buildings. I probably should go back and take a look at those old buildings. Some people are telling me that those buildings had something to do with a milk plant in that location. Other people saying that that used to be the engineers, the repair buildings where they repaired old trains and train engines. So I'm going to take a look at that and see if we can understand and identify those buildings. Now, what's happening in this section? This is becoming the junkyard of Guyana. A lot of these imported vehicles end up in accidents because Guyanese, of course, are very careless drunk drivers. So a lot of these vehicles end up in this junkyard where I guess they're parted out and sold for parts. But this is what's happening here at this section of the train line. It's a huge, global spare parts, as the building says, global spare parts and auto sales. It's a huge business now, junking these vehicles. But that's what's happening here on the train line road. Like I said, this road continues all the way to Lamaha. We've seen the Lamaha Park in a previous video where they turned the middle section of the train line into a picketed, they put up a picket fence and turned it into what I call a vest pocket park. We've seen that in a previous video. I'll probably show you it again later in this video, in the next video. But this is what's happening on the train line road and the widening of the train line road. I thought that this would be a wider road all the way to the end, but it turns out that this is the final version of it yet, based on the way things have been going. It's probably not going to become wider than this. This is the final version of the train line road here in Kitty in Campbellville. Kitty on the west side, right, all of that is Kitty, and then the other side is Campbellville, and north is Bryanville. That's it, guys. That's what's up. That's just what's happening in this neck of the wood. If you want to see more content like this, click like and subscribe. It's Sunday morning, and it's Sunday the 8th of, the street takes you through to Kitty. Sunday the 8th of September 2024. Share this video with friends and family around the world. Let people know what's happening here in the fastest growing country in the world, Guyana. Later!